Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. Today, or perhaps tomorrow, depending on your time zone, Mercury goes stationary direct. It has been going backwards for the last 3 weeks from a point of view of the Earth, and it's slowing down, and today it comes to a standstill, and then it starts to go forward. So it's currently at around 21 Leo. This is where it comes to a standstill, and then it starts moving through late Leo, and eventually it'll move into Virgo. So I want to consider what this might mean from a perspective of the world, and perhaps from a perspective of us, and also a few famous people who might be impacted by it. For example, Elon Musk and Kamala Harris. But before I talk about Mercury going stationary direct, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. Just a reminder, if you like this video, be really happy if you were to indicate that you liked it. And if you're not subscribed, I would really be grateful if you were to subscribe. Okay, so let's see what's happening today. So here is the positions of the planets for today, Wednesday. By the way, that planet here, that is Mercury. It's not the moon, it's not Pluto, it is Mercury. And it's a small planet, very close to the sun. Obviously, no life on it, no atmosphere. It's pretty inhospitable. I think one side is really hot and the other side is really cold. The side away from the sun just never gets any sunlight. Is that right? Anyway, I'm not a great expert on astronomy. Astrology is my thing. So looking at the positions of the planets, I suppose the first thing to point out is that the moon is in Cancer. Moon is at, according at noon in New York, it's at 3:55 Cancer. First, it's already past the first few degrees of this sign. Now, if you're in London, the moon moves into Cancer at 9:47 in the morning. So, if you're in Europe, the first part of the day, up until the early mid-morning, the moon will still be in Gemini, but then it will, late morning, be moving into Cancer. It's a similar picture if you're in Africa. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is not going to go into Cancer until late this evening, or mid-late this evening, I think. And the same if you're in East Asia. So in Asia, the moon will move into Cancer sort of as the day progresses. But probably for most people watching this video, you can kind of take the view that the moon is in Cancer. So as far as what is happening today, even if you're not in the Americas, the moon will be making a sort of a conjunction to Mars. So because the moon makes that conjunction to Mars in Gemini, but still, even in the Americas, you can feel the fact that the moon and Mars are pretty close to one another. And so there is a moon-Mars conjunction feel to the day, especially at the beginning of the day. So moon-Mars conjunction can be a little bit tense. People can get angry, and if you start to sort of tread on their toes or to cross their boundaries, so some of us might have to tread carefully. I don't think the anger is going to be super intense. I mean, it's not like a Moon-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. It's more, Moon-Mars conjunction in Gemini is perhaps likely to be more verbal, and if you're in Australia and New Zealand, then you're probably going to be feeling the Moon-Mars conjunction the most. That could really experience itself as verbal anger and irritation. And the moon when it moves into Cancer, it starts to make a sextile to the Sun, and that is a very different energy to Moon conjunct Mars. Moon sextile Sun, remember that's Moon in Cancer, sextile Sun in Virgo. That is an energy that is quite harmonious. We're going to want to create harmony rather than conflict. That's going to be our natural reaction to whatever's going on around us. Again, especially as the day progresses, the emphasis will be more and more on harmony. And I just don't think that many of us are really going to be interested in conflict. So that's kind of quite pleasant in a way. Now, there is another aspect to consider which may not be exactly there today, maybe more about tomorrow, but we are starting to feel it, and that is an opposition between Venus and Neptune. Now, that Venus-Neptune opposition may actually be quite treacherous because Neptune is relatively close to Skeet. Remember, that's a fixed star often related to sort of disasters and shipwrecks. So when you have Venus opposition Neptune, that can incline us to do things that may be unwise. If you're captain of a ship, you might want to go too fast. You might run into icebergs, but that's not going to happen, is it? So there is a heightened risk of disaster, perhaps relating to water. I think we do all of us have to be careful with water and plumbing and all that kind of thing with Venus opposition Neptune. Venus opposition Neptune can also relate to money and relationships, perhaps being over imaginative. There's a certain sense of fantasy there, thinking that things can happen when in actual fact we know that they can't possibly happen. But are we going to be completely rational about it? It may be difficult, especially once the moon has gone out of Gemini into Cancer. I mean, moon in Gemini is a fairly sort of rational placement for the moon. So all of a sudden we do get a blast of emotion, and we have to really work out how to deal with it. And we don't want to reach the wrong impressions in terms of how we understand other people and how we respond to them. Then there is Mercury going stationary direct. So this happens at 22:14 in the evening, London time. I don't think you need to worry too much about the precise times. But if you're in Europe, it happens this evening. If you're in the Americas, it's this afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's tomorrow. But, Mercury going stationary direct, for many of us, is just going to be a bit of a relief. We've had Mercury going retrograde for the last 3 weeks, and it may have felt that something was on hold, that we didn't really understand what was happening and what was going on. And as a result, we might have made mistakes, or things may have been on hold. It may in fact feel that a lot of things are on hold. For the last 3 weeks, looking at the world in general, have actually been surprisingly stable in a way. I mean, particularly from a geopolitical point of view. There's always been this threat of, for example, outbreaks of devastating war in the Middle East. Yeah, sure, things have been happening, but it's all been very contained. And you look at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, we had all this hype about and I'm afraid hype to an extent I was helping to generate, this hype about the full moon square Uranus on the first day of the Chicago Convention. It didn't seem anything happened, and maybe Mercury was just putting everything on hold. That may be how Mercury retrograde was actually working. And in our own lives, we may feel that certain things are on hold. We were expecting things to happen. Or, as the I Ching likes to say, it uses this wonderful phrase, dense clouds, no rain. Maybe that's what it feels like. Dense clouds, something was supposed to happen, but it didn't happen. But the clouds haven't gone away. And maybe with Mercury moving direct, maybe things were on hold and now starting to come into the foreground. So that is perhaps something we need to watch as Mercury becomes stationary and then starts to move direct. And as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, here it is, looking at things from the perspective of the sun at the center of the solar system, which of course it is, obviously. Venus is still square Pluto. I think the exact Venus square Pluto aspect was yesterday, but it's still very much there with that Venus square Pluto. So with Venus square Pluto, there may be a certain sense in which we are perhaps a little bit guarded. Some of us might be, especially when it comes to dealing with other people. We don't want to give everything away. But at the same time, with Venus square Pluto, some people may be trying their hardest to be a little manipulative, perhaps on an emotional level with that Venus square Pluto. But I think it's more collective. I don't think we as individuals need necessarily be too concerned about it. And turning to Mercury, Mercury is sextile Jupiter. So you can see Mercury 8 Aries, sextile Jupiter 7 Gemini. Remember, this is from a sun's perspective. Mercury, we've talked about Mercury going stationary direct, but that is a geocentric view. From a heliocentric view, Mercury never goes retrograde because we're looking at things from a point of view of the sun. So Mercury sextile Jupiter is, I would have said, quite fortunate. I think it gives a lot of us a sense of optimism, a sense that things are happening, that we can make things happen, and that in spite of all of our misgivings and all our concerns about the future, things are going to be fine. We're going to be able to find a way forward. And at the same time, Mercury is moving towards a semi-square with Uranus. So Mercury semi-square Uranus can represent information perhaps that we weren't expecting. It just comes out of the blue. We realize something perhaps. Perhaps the world in general is realizing things with Mercury semi-square Uranus. The world hadn't realized things in the past, and suddenly it's becoming clear, it's becoming obvious, although many people, including governments, are perhaps in denial. So that's the heliocentric picture, and I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. And that needs to be a chart, I think, which has, let me just change that chart because I want to have Aries on the absolute left. So let me just fix that. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Okay, these are my forecasts for today, Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024, for the 12 signs. Aries. Aries, the last couple of days have been quite busy. There's been sort of a lot of frenetic activity, certainly a lot of frenetic activity in your head, a lot of things that you've been thinking about, and a lot of things also that you've been wanting to communicate. And there may have been a certain hurry to express things, and in fact that hurry may make itself felt at the beginning of the day. And if you are in East Asia, Australia or New Zealand, because we do have this conjunction between the Moon and Mars. Now this conjunction between Moon and Mars, if you're in the Americas, it's kind of over, but I think that you'll still feel it to some extent. And so although you're kind of calming down, there's still this feeling that something perhaps needs to be done, needs to be expressed. There may be a last-minute flash of anger when you were least expecting it, when you thought you sort of got over everything. And yeah, that's especially going to be the case if you are in Australia or New Zealand with the moon conjunct Mars. Just something just annoys you at the last moment. But then the moon is moving into Cancer, and if you're in Africa, Europe, the Americas, then that's perhaps the main thing about today. It's a moon changing sign into Cancer, and from an Aries perspective, that moon moving into Cancer does kind of calm you down. Some of the pressure seems to go, and you feel a certain sense that maybe you have been sort of worrying about nothing. There's been a lot of sound and fury and aggravation, and now you've had enough. You sort of whatever, hang up your gun belt. Maybe that's how it feels, and looking at perhaps the common ground between you and others. And there is plenty of common ground with that moon sextile the sun, and it's all about kind of slowing things down and perhaps doing things that are simple and manageable and not really thinking too far ahead. Now, Mercury does go stationary direct, and that does affect all 12 signs, but I suppose in different ways. So Mercury is in a wide square to Mars, your ruler, and that means that your mind is going to perhaps slow down a bit. There are plenty of things going on just outside around you, but perhaps before you haven't been able to really fully understand them. Perhaps you've been too keen to talk about them and not keen enough to just think about them and to just see them in isolation. And it may also have something to do with your approach to the things you're good at. Mercury's in Leo. It's a very creative place for Mercury to be in. And you perhaps have just second thoughts about what you can do and perhaps the limits of what you can do. And at first it might be a little bit difficult, but you perhaps realize that at some level you might have been going in the wrong direction. You may have been pursuing something in a quite regressive kind of way, and you'd been going back over old ground, and it felt that you really weren't accomplishing anything. But now it's starting to make a bit of sense as Mercury goes direct. And as Mercury goes direct, you can start to think again about what you're good at, and maybe something that you'd put on hold can now be put back into action. Maybe you were working on something which was really important to you, and it was fundamentally important to you as a creative Aries, and it had been delayed or postponed, or things just didn't happen for one reason or another. But now, with Mercury going direct, you can see how you can make things start to work again. You understand now what was missing. And so I think that is quite optimistic. And when you link this with the fact that the moon is in Cancer, we get the image perhaps of Aries, being able to calm down and focus on the things that are important. And I think in most cases you will be nurtured by the people around you. Though at the beginning of the day, and if you are in Australia or New Zealand, make sure you don't get angry at the last moment. It could spoil it. It could spoil things when you were starting to get things together. So try to keep your anger in check to begin with, because it's not in accord with the times. And I think Aries, it's probably completely unnecessary. Taurus, you feel that there are things that need to be said, but you can say them in a way that is really quite relaxing and almost graceful, really. You're not going to cause upset with the things you say. And I mean, I don't think you even have very much to say, but the things you say could be quite reassuring. A lot of people want reassurance, after all. And I think that today Taurians are going to be very good at putting people at their ease. You know what bothers them, and you know what to say to get people to calm down, because Taurians can be very calming people. They can get people to relax, and they can put things in perspective. So Taurus, make sure that you're able to do that, and don't be afraid of telling people what you feel, provided you're completely genuine about it. And the key point, Taurus, is to think about how can you get people to calm down, how can you get people to relax. And this is made more pressing by the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct in Leo, and so there may be a moment where your thoughts and other people's thoughts, and in particular the thoughts of your family and the communication between you and your family, may sort of come to a standstill. It's like now everything has been said, at least in a family and domestic setting. Everything's been said. Everyone knows where things are going, and that should really make things pretty comfortable. And communication, of course, happens on many different levels. Communication is not just about coming up with a barrage of words. It's not about a barrage of words. It can be about communicating with your body language, with your feelings. And yeah, you do just have this natural ability to get people to relax. And so I hope you're able to make the most of it. Now, one warning, Venus, which is your ruler, is starting to move towards an opposition of Neptune. Now, this needn't be a problem, this Venus-Neptune opposition. Now, it's not. I think it's actually exact tomorrow rather than today, but it's pretty close now. But this Venus opposition Neptune may make you slightly accident prone. I don't think I mean that in a physical sense, like tripping up or anything like that. It's just that there may be moments where you actually can't see what's going on. And if you can't see what's going on, then there's a danger that you trip yourself up. And so always ask yourself today and tomorrow, are you aware where you're stepping? Are you aware where you're moving? Because suddenly you might move into an area that you don't fully understand. You're making assumptions, but you don't actually get it. And so you need to be aware of that. So today, it's very important that you know what's going on. And that's especially the case with other people. You must know what's going on. If you feel you don't know what's going on, then take a step back. That really is okay. And I suppose Venus opposition Neptune, it is tied up with this fixed star Skeet, which is a star connected with water, accidents, shipwrecks. So, the usual advice: watch out for things connected with water. Probably a bad time to go swimming, boating. No, I wouldn't play around with boats at the moment. And look after your washing machine. Make sure that your plumbing is all in order. And I'm not saying anything's going to happen. I'm just saying that with an abundance of caution, you could check that anything connected with water is all in order, and certainly don't take risks with water with Venus opposition Neptune. I don't think right now Taurians have a good affinity with water. Venus is in late Virgo. It's a place which Venus in late Virgo doesn't want too much emotion. Too much emotion could spoil things, and also too much water in general. I mean, some people just hate water. I'm not saying you hate water. My dog hates water. Absolutely hates water. Previous dog, we had the same breed. Previous dog would not would not go into a room that had a tap in it, because, well, in that case, the dog associated taps with baths, and so the dog immediately, left, because dog didn't like baths. Because that's my dog, and the previous dog. Both dogs had an issue with water. So I think you might have a bit of an issue with water, and where there's water, there's trouble. I think that might be true to say. Gemini. So Gemini, Mercury is going stationary direct, and that is important. You are a Gemini, and so with Mercury going stationary direct, it may have felt that over the last 3 weeks, you haven't entirely been able to think straight. Your mind has been perhaps racing, and you have felt at times that you really didn't know which way to turn. You perhaps were aware that one decision leads to another decision, and you might have felt that you made wrong decisions, and perhaps you were trying to work out what you needed to do to get out of a bad situation which you may have created yourself. And there may have been a lot of thoughts around this, and it just might feel at the moment really very difficult and sort of uncomfortable, and you haven't really been known what to do. You haven't really known what to do next. And I understand, Gemini, you've tried your hardest to be rational, but it hasn't always been easy. And so it's a kind of a relief that Mercury is finally going stationary direct after 3 weeks of going retrograde. And I think today and tomorrow it will feel that as if you're starting to understand something. You've been trying your very hardest to understand it, but now it's becoming clear. So if over the last 3 weeks, maybe you tried to understand something by reading about it on the internet, or by reading a manual or reading a description, and you read it and it just didn't make any sense at all. But now, if you start to read something, try to understand something, it's going to suddenly be very easy. It'll now be obvious. And so, Gemini, I think that is a reason to be quite happy that things that were obscure and complicated are now coming into focus, and that's going to make things a lot easier for you. Now, at the beginning of the day, and especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Mars in Gemini. It's in late Gemini. The Moon is about to move into Cancer. In fact, it does move into Cancer today. But there may be a certain sense of annoyance with Moon conjunct Mars, and you may feel that you want to sort of express yourself sort of verbally, and you've got something to say, and you expect people to listen to you. And it may be that you do have something to say, but be careful. Mercury might be about to go direct, but sometimes just before it goes direct, before that precise moment, there could be a moment of total misunderstanding right at the last moment, just as everything is about to become clear. Gemini, you might make a mistake which is just so unfortunate. You are on the verge of clarity, You were on the brink of clarity, and just as you were moving into clarity, you had a moment of total chaos where you couldn't see anything and you made a bad decision. So, Gemini, don't get too angry with that moon conjunct Mars. I know that that moon conjunct Mars particularly impacts you if you're in Australia, New Zealand, and East Asia, but it can impact you wherever you are, because the moon is still, in terms of where it is in the sky, is still pretty close to Mars. And so, Gemini, what you don't want to do is make a bad decision at the moment when things are starting to become clear, because sometimes the moment just before clarity is a moment of maximum chaos. So the moon does go out of Gemini, your sign today, which is, I think, perhaps quite fortunate. You know, when the moon moves out of Gemini into Cancer, that means that the power of that Moon-Mars conjunction is starting to wane, and with the moon in Cancer, I think that you're starting to feel more grounded, and I think that there is certainly less pressure on you. And also the moon in Cancer makes a sextile to the sun in Virgo. So moon sextile sun, you know, as an aspect tends to be fairly reassuring. It's certainly not about excitement. It's about being able to just ground oneself, be able to sort of understand what's going on, and maybe just not feel that one has to talk so much. I mean, I know Geminis like talking, but there are perhaps limits to what you can say. And in fact, with Mercury going stationary direct, that point at which Mercury goes stationary direct, it may be a point where you have nothing to say. There may be this moment where the words dry up, the Gemini communication machine, the wheels finally grind to a halt. And I mean that in a positive sense. You just feel that whatever's been said has already been said. You know, as they say, nothing has been said that hasn't been said before. In fact, you know, I think William Lilly in his textbook on astrology, or his casebook on astrology, Christian astrology, that was what the book was called. You know, he said nothing has been. I think he says nothing has been said, but nothing has been said that hasn't been said before. And I think what Lilly was saying, I mean, he was a Taurus, not a Gemini, William Lilly, but what he was saying in terms of astrology, he was just reminding us that we have to think of the tradition. You know, he took a view that you don't come up with new ideas. Astrology is grounded in a tradition. Hence, nothing has been said that hasn't been said before. But perhaps that's how you might feel, that anything you say today, particularly at that moment when Mercury goes stationary direct, anything that's said, you know, it's kind of pointless. You know, why say it again? And also, when you're silent, when you're quiet, when the words dry up, you are in that moment of understanding, and that's kind of what it is, what you should actually be striving for today, Gemini. You know, to really get it, to understand it, and also to understand other people. Because other people have been important to you, I think, over the last couple of days, and I think that they continue to be important. And I think in terms of other people, I mean, if you're with people you like and appreciate, then again, I don't think there's much that necessarily has to be said. The key point is that you're with people and that you're in contact with people. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to specifically say anything. You will be understood. You don't have to push the point. So, overall, Gemini, it should be, I think, a day when you try to be quiet. It's a special time when Mercury goes stationary direct, when things finally start to make sense, when finally you have that precise moment where everything is focused. And yeah, if you try to do too much, if you try to be too active, that's going to spoil the focus. So do make the most of it, and when you get that moment of clarity, that will give you a strong sense of what you should be doing next. Cancer, the moon is moving into your sign, and I think that's good news. The moon is, as I think rules Cancer, so the moon is well placed in Cancer, and so when the moon is in this sign, you do feel that you don't have to strive. You don't have to be someone you're not, and everything happening around you is starting to be clear, and essentially you can just be yourself. And when the moon moves into Cancer, it also makes a sextile to the sun. And moon sextile sun, it's a very fortunate aspect, moon sextile sun. For a start, the sextile is a good aspect. I know that's sort of a bit of a generalization, saying sextiles are a good aspect, but they are. Sextiles are about harmony, about things relating to one another. And with this moon sextile sun, I think you will have a good relationship with your external environment, with the people around you, with your community. You won't feel out of sorts. You won't feel like a crab out of water. No, I think crabs are happiest in water, aren't they? I'm not an expert on crabs, but of course crabs are a water sign. So you'll feel that you don't have to strive to be someone you're not, and I think it's a time also when you can make other people feel comfortable. It's because of that moon sextile the sun, which I think is very much going to sort of work in your favour. And really, that's all it is in terms of the aspect. So I don't think actually with this moon sextile sun, there's anything you actually have to do today. I think that you know what needs to be done, but I suppose anything you can do that can create further harmony would be welcomed. I think the universe would certainly welcome it. Now, we do have Mercury also going stationary direct, and it's taking place in Leo, and it might have an impact on money. It might, I say might, because I do understand that some Cancerians don't regard money as being particularly important. You haven't perhaps looked at this horoscope reading because you want to hear about money, but I think some of you might. And so with Mercury going stationary direct in Leo, it's possible that certain financial matters which might have been difficult for you to understand may now be starting to resolve themselves, or you're perhaps starting to see the full picture. The last 3 weeks you may have been trying to get something financially or trying to make sense of it, but you hadn't really made much progress. But now that Mercury is going stationary direct in Leo, and Leo being a sign which has a special relationship to your finances, so have another look perhaps at some financial issue that you didn't really get in the past, but have another look at it. It now may start to make sense. Also, perhaps if there's been a financial issue, or maybe even a loss, or you felt you were owed some money and you felt that a few weeks back. Now with Mercury going stationary direct, you may have a chance to get that money back, or to start again on a process of getting that money back, or not just necessarily getting money back, but perhaps a financial plan that you had but you lost track of. Now it's becoming clear again. And I'm not just talking about today or tomorrow, I'm just talking about the next few weeks, or certainly the next week, as Mercury turns stationary direct. Then that's something that you might want to do. So overall, Cancer, I think it's a day when the focus should be on making yourself feel comfortable. Yeah, sure, the beginning of a day, there are still annoyances, maybe people who are annoying, but these annoyances are reducing. It's probably not even worth making a fuss. So if at the beginning of the day you feel you need to make a fuss about something, maybe all day actually, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I wouldn't do it. I don't think there's any point, because you're just going over the past, and what you should be moving towards, as the moon moves into Cancer, as the moon makes a sextile to the sun, as you get increasing clarity with Mercury going direct, what you should be moving towards is a sense of overall harmony. And I think that can make you feel better, and it can also make other people feel better as well. Leo, you're still feeling quite optimistic in your own way. I think that you think that things are okay. However difficult things might have been in the past, you feel that things are getting better. And I think that sense of optimism is enhanced by the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct. So Mercury is in Leo. It's been going retrograde for 3 weeks, and today it's coming to a standstill, and then it starts moving forward from the Earth's perspective. Of course, heliocentric Mercury never goes retrograde. So with Mercury being stationary direct in your sign, I would have said that some of your thoughts and ideas, which may have been on hold for a few weeks, or may have been confused and undermined perhaps over the last few weeks, it's all coming together again. It's now the confusion is starting to end, and I think it's going to be increasingly easy for you to be clear about what you want. And that might have been a problem over the last few weeks. Perhaps over the last few weeks you had tried very hard to be clear, to get your point across, but it hadn't always been easy. But with Mercury going stationary direct, I think it is becoming much easier, and you'll be able to find the words in order to really express yourself. But I don't think there's any hurry at the moment. The moon is changing sign. The moon is moving from Gemini into Cancer, and I think with the moon moving into Cancer, which is a sign just before Leo, and so moon in Cancer can actually be quite introspective from a Leo perspective, and it may just feel that you you don't really want to stick your neck out. Yeah, you might have things to say, but I don't think you're going to want to say it in a public way, not yet. And remember, just because we say that Mercury is going stationary direct, it's not necessarily feeling like the moment Mercury goes stationary direct, everything has to change for Leo. I mean, that moment is, for example, 10:14 in the evening in London, or 5:14 in the afternoon in New York, on the dot. No, it's not like that. It's just a period of a couple of days, perhaps, where Mercury transitions from moving retrograde to moving forward, for moving direct. And perhaps during this period of transition, you don't have to do much. You maybe don't have to do anything. And, especially with the moon in Cancer. Now, the moon will move into Leo eventually, and maybe when the moon moves into Leo, that will be the signal to really start to make things happen. Now, as far as when the moon moves into Leo, I suppose you'll want to know that. So the moon moves into Leo on August the 30th, so that would be on Friday. So the moon moves onto Leo on Friday. So today's Wednesday. So perhaps you should hold back until Friday before, for example, making big announcements or putting things back into action. So I think that, Leo, that means that there really isn't so much pressure on you. Though the moon, when it is in Cancer, it is making a nice sextile to the sun, and the sun is your ruler. And I think that moon sextile sun is, I would have said, quite reassuring. There may have been a few worries that had been building up. You just weren't sure about certain things, and you were just concerned how things were going to work out. And I think that moon sextile sun may kind of reduce those worries, either because you can see that those worries were unreal. They weren't based on anything real. They were just a fantasy or some kind of nightmare. Or perhaps you can see that your concerns might be genuine, but at the same time you can see how to fix them, and that will start to become very obvious to you. And it's nothing dramatic. It's just very, very clear that it's not an insoluble problem, and if you just go about the solution in a solid, no nonsense way, then I think that things should be fine. Virgo. Mercury is going stationary direct. I told you Mercury was about to go stationary direct, and now it has happened. Or, okay, it happens. It happens at 14 minutes past 10 in London. So, sure, if you're in 14 minutes past 10 in the evening in London, actually. So it may happen tomorrow if you're in Asia or Australia or New Zealand. It will certainly happen today if you're in the Americas. So, it depends today, tomorrow, but Mercury is direct. I mean, that is the main thing that needs to be said. And Virgo, Mercury is your ruler. And with Mercury going direct, I think that you're going to be just feeling better. Last few weeks, you may not have been particularly sure what was going on, and there may have been uncertainty, and you might have had to go back on things which you really didn't want to do, but you had to go back over old ground, and you weren't perhaps always very sure of your own ideas, and there were distractions, and you had to consider other pieces of information, and it was just perhaps a little bit difficult. But anyway, Mercury's going stationary direct, so things are clear, or becoming clear. And it's actually quite a private process. It's not anything dramatic where you're out there in public having dramatic changes of mind. It's not like that. It's just a sense in which privately, on your own, in your own way, you understand that things are starting to become clear, and also things that had been kept secret from you are now being revealed. And reality and revelation can come in many ways. It can absolutely come in. The reality can hit you in a dreamlike world. I remember I was in psychotherapy for some time, and this is decades ago, a long time ago, and I was seeing this therapist for a few years, and I had this dream in which I dreamt that the psychotherapist was saying goodbye to me, or something like that. I can't remember the precise dream. And so I went to this therapy session, and I said, and I was, of course, when you go to a psychotherapist, you always talk about your dreams. That's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? And I mentioned this, and then he replied, and he said, well, I think now is the time to tell you. I'm about to leave town. I'm about to move. I'm going to move out of London. I'm going to move somewhere else. So our sessions are indeed coming to an end. And so it can also often happen in dreams. Dreams can where it sets, where we really start to understand something. When a situation is over, when we haven't fully recognized it, it's the dream tells us. So the dream is a moment where reality happens. And so perhaps that's what's happening now for you, Virgo. I'm not saying that you're going to dream it. And it's very nice if you have a dream, but at a sort of unconscious dream, in an unconscious dreamlike way, you just get to understand. And when you understand it on sort of an unconscious level, you understand it at all levels. And so maybe that's actually what's happening today, Virgo. That's what's happening to you, Virgo. You get to understand something in private, in your own way, and it just becomes clear. It doesn't have to be explained. It's obvious. And also, in terms of secrets, you're going to be in a position where you can discover your own secrets. The things you've been keeping secret from yourself, yes, that can happen. And perhaps the secrets can be revealed through experience. They can be revealed through dreams, or finding objects from the past which make it all very clear. And also, if anyone else has been holding things back from you today, then I think you can uncover these secrets. And that's not, you can uncover these secrets. I'm not talking about through a lot of research and delving and all that kind of thing. You just uncover the secrets in your own way, just by thinking about them, and it just happens and it's obvious. So I think that is quite productive. And at the same time, we do have a sextile aspect between the moon and the sun, and that's nice as well, because the sun is in Virgo, moon is in Cancer, and that's quite sociable, but it's also quite reassuring, and it's perhaps about being with people you trust and having a sense that you are supported by your friends. Maybe not by all of your friends, by some of your friends. It just reminds you perhaps that you're not alone, and you shouldn't feel yourself to be alone today, because Virgo, I think there is plenty of support, and it's not crazy support. It's just comfortable, low profile support, knowing that people are there for you, and if you don't want them to be there for you, they don't have to be there for you. It's up to you. So I think in that sense it can be quite a comfortable day, but also a day of revelation. Libra, there is an opposition forming between Venus and Neptune. Now, I think this Venus-Neptune opposition is actually exact tomorrow, but I think you could feel it to an extent today. So this opposition could be troublesome. could be. I mean, not necessarily. Because what we've got here is we've got Venus at around 29 Virgo, opposition Neptune at around 29 Pisces. And of course, Venus is your ruler, so it's opposition Neptune, which is a planet often associated with confusion. And so you may reach the wrong conclusions today. And Venus arguably is not in a particularly good position. You know, it's last degrees of the sign, and it's, you know, Venus is fallen. You know, Venus is exalted in Pisces, therefore it's fallen in Virgo. And yeah, it's opposition Neptune. So I know that in a day or two's time, Venus has a massive transition. It moves into Libra, its own sign. So Venus suddenly becomes a lot stronger, but we have to deal with the here and now. Right now, Venus is in Virgo, and it's opposition Neptune. And I think you shouldn't take it for granted that you understand things. You should not take it for granted that people are telling the truth. You should not take it for granted that your own powers of judgment are 100%. You could very easily make mistakes, perhaps because you're dazzled. Perhaps also with Venus in Virgo, you want things to be done in a particular way. You expect things to be done in a particular way. You have a good sense of order. At least you think you have a good sense of order. And then circumstances happen out there which you basically hadn't planned for. You haven't got a template for them, and you don't know how to respond. So you come up with a response, but that response might not be appropriate. And you know, we should not forget that Neptune is relatively close to Skeet, a fixed star connected with disaster. Now, I'm not predicting disaster, but I'm just warning you that you should just not take things for granted, and you should, in general, tread carefully, not take risks, and do not believe that you understand things. You know, you might think you understand something perfectly, but maybe you don't. So that's the downside of today, which I thought I needed to get that out of the way. Now, there are other things going on which are certainly more positive. You know, Mercury is going stationary direct. Mercury is going stationary direct in Leo, and in terms of your social life, you may see some movement. Maybe you've fallen out with someone, or you've lost touch with someone, maybe a friend, and you haven't been able to get back in touch with them for weeks. You may have been trying. Maybe you sent them emails. You tried calling them, but it just didn't work. But with Mercury stationary direct, it may be you're able to get back in touch with someone. Not necessarily today, but over the next couple of days, you may be able to resume a connection. Now, that doesn't mean to say that just because you resume a connection, you have to spend a lot of time with them. It's just about opening up a line of communication which you can start to use, in a few days' time. Also, Libra, we have got the moon moving from Gemini into Cancer. And I think moon moving into Cancer, it is by and large fortunate. The moon in Cancer in the Libra horoscope is very much connected with your sense of direction and you having a strong sense of direction. But we do have to remember that Venus is opposition Neptune. So in one sense, you don't have a great sense of direction at the moment, yet it is important for you to have a direction. So I think I would say that it's important, sure, to take your ambition seriously, but at the same time to be sensible about it. It's not a time for creating new ambitions. You should be focusing on ambitions that you know and trust, not anything that could be a product of your fantasies, or perhaps a product of someone pressurizing you, or someone trying to delude you. Yeah, it could happen. People trying to get you excited about something, which in reality has no hope of realization because of that Venus opposition Neptune. So you've kind of got to be in two places at once. You've got to understand that you're capable of following the wrong path, making the wrong decision, being influenced by the wrong information, by false information. But on the other hand, you've got to see yourself as an ambitious person who can go out into the world and make things happen, because the moon in Cancer is sextile the sun in Virgo. So perhaps what you need to do, Libra, is to be aware of these pulls. So you've got moon in Cancer sextile the sun in Virgo. That's a really nice aspect which can have a fortunate impact. You've also got Venus opposition Neptune. So just be aware of where the pitfalls lie. Just be aware of that capacity for being over-optimistic and being vulnerable to deception. If you are practical and sensible and you stick with things that you know have worked in the past, then I think, Libra, that you're going to be fine. Scorpio. Scorpio, you may feel at the beginning of the day the influence of a conjunction between the moon and Mars. And beginning of the day, yes, particularly if you're in Australia and New Zealand, yes, so that's how you might feel it. I think in the Americas, probably less so, but that conjunction between the moon and Mars may perhaps make you feel that something needs to be said, something may be perhaps annoying you and you just want to get it out of the way and you can't help yourself. But Scorpio, I would maybe suggest that you should keep it to yourself. It's kind of very much related to the past. You know, you need to be forward thinking. And yes, people might have upset you in the past, they may have done things wrong in the past, but do you want to drag it all up all over again? I suspect you probably don't. And so that Moon-Mars conjunction, yes, it could make you annoyed, but I would have said somehow, if you possibly can, you should perhaps discount it and start to look towards the future. And what is the future? Well, the future is that the moon is moving out of Gemini into Cancer. And from a Scorpio perspective, that is good news. I understand if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you may not really feel that moon moving into Cancer until tomorrow, but tomorrow's tomorrow, and that's something to look forward to. But certainly Americas, Western Europe, the moon is very much in Cancer for the vast majority of the day. And so with the moon in Cancer, you can start to think about things in a new way, and especially as Mercury is going stationary direct. So Mercury goes stationary direct in Leo, which is an angular house for Scorpios. It's a high profile house. And so with Mercury going direct, with the moon moving into Cancer, it's like there's a breath of fresh air. Things may have been stagnating over the last couple of days, maybe even longer, and the stagnation is being cleared out. The system is being cleared out, and it's sort of out with the old, in with the new, and you can see that there are new ways of doing things, and it's easier for you to be imaginative and open-minded than it has been sort of recently. And if things like career and business are important to you, then I think your ideas are going to start coming together. Perhaps over the last 3 weeks, you've been trying to sort something out. You've been trying to understand what's going on. You've been trying to understand where you want to go. And with Mercury going stationary direct, it's now becoming clear. Okay, maybe not today or tomorrow completely, because it is a process of clarity. Mercury actually goes stationary direct, quite late in the day, certainly if you're in Europe, and into tomorrow if you're in Australia, for example. But today and tomorrow, as Mercury comes to a standstill, Scorpio, it's just a feeling that you understand what is perhaps happening at work or in your business, and what you want to do, and what your ambitions are, and what you want to say. And it's all there, it's all clear, and things which had been on hold for some time, you can now start progressing with them, and progressing forward with them. And I suppose that would particularly apply if you're in a situation where you have a lot of autonomy. So if you have autonomy with Mercury going stationary direct, you can start to use that autonomy and start doing things your way, and also being reasonably sure that you have got it right. Now, that doesn't mean to say that other people have got it right. And there are good grounds for being self-sufficient. And one of these grounds is the fact that Venus is opposition Neptune. And so Venus is opposition Neptune today and tomorrow. And with Venus opposition Neptune, you may find that people you thought were reliable, were trustworthy, but knew what they were doing, they may fall short of the mark. Not their fault, I don't think. It's just, right now, they're somewhat flaky. So I would be very wary of listening too hard to what other people are saying, advising, suggesting. That doesn't mean you can't listen, but I think some people have misunderstood things. They might sound very convincing, but they have misunderstood things. And so if you're going to follow anyone's advice today, then I would have said follow your own advice. Be self-sufficient. And that's what Scorpios want to hear, isn't it? Scorpios, as a sign, can be somewhat mistrusting. And today I think there are good grounds for being mistrusting. Now, as far as close relationships are concerned, it goes back to that Venus opposition Neptune. The people close to you are in a state of transition. They're trying to move from one place to another, and they are unsure of themselves. Sure, you don't want to take their advice, but you can still go with them. You can be with them, perhaps, as they make this change. And of course, Venus soon enough will move into Libra. And I think when Venus moves into Libra, probably you're going to find that other people are going to be more reliable. But there's a rider to that, because Libra as a sign is, it's quite secretive from a Scorpio perspective. But I'll be talking about that tomorrow. No, not tomorrow, probably over the next couple of days. I'll be talking about what it means for Scorpio for Venus to be in Libra. But main takeaways for today is be self-reliant, don't trust other people, and really start to bring together your own ideas and ambitions, because they are starting to clarify after a few weeks of uncertainty. Things are beginning to move in the right direction. Sagittarius, you may notice a certain change in people, the important people in your life, and that's because Mercury is going stationary direct. And Mercury is, of course, ruler of Gemini, which is your opposite sign. And so with Mercury going stationary direct, it may be that certain people are becoming clearer, and perhaps the fog is lifting. So if there's been someone who you haven't really understood, but someone important, but someone who nonetheless didn't really understand, if we're talking about that kind of person, then you may get more information. It's going to be easier to gauge what they're thinking and feeling. Perhaps they're being more honest, or you yourself are perhaps more perceptive with Mercury going stationary direct. You can perhaps understand people before they understand themselves. And so it's nice, I think, to have a certain amount of clarity in that direction. And also, Sagittarius, I think that you're going to be, in a way, sort of perhaps a little bit deeper than usual. You know, Sagittarius perhaps doesn't have a reputation for being intense and deep, but I think at the moment, as the moon moves from Gemini into Cancer, you know, it will be clear that you are a serious person, and you know, there is, it would seem, an emotional side to who you are. You know, I know that Sagittarius is not known for being a particularly emotional sign, but with the moon going into Cancer, I think that you're going to find it easier to tune into your emotions, and also to tune into the emotions of other people. And the moon, when it moves into Cancer, it does actually make a sextile to the sun, and I think that moon sextile sun is going to be very useful, because it will allow you to perhaps understand other people's agenda. And it's often important to understand people's agenda. You want to know why they're doing things. I suppose that's especially the case if you're involved in business or politics or anything to do with power. And you can just see what people's agenda actually is. You can see what feeds them, what makes them tick, what turns them on. It's all very clear now with that moon sextile the sun. And so if you have a sudden inspiration, and that's how it works because you're a Sagittarian, with that moon sextile sun, you just see it. You can feel it, you can intuit it, it's obvious. And so if you get a sense of what motivates people, it just makes things just a whole lot easier. And it just makes it easier to deal with them as well. I mean, it's not about having a revelation, which is a bad thing. You have a revelation and then you realize how bad it is and you run away. It's not like that at all. It's about having a revelation which actually makes you more effective. And if you, for example, understand that someone's motives are rotten to the core, for example, that doesn't mean to say you have to be afraid of them. It means that you're in a position to maybe manipulate them, because you know what motivates them. And once you know what motivates someone, you can start to have a really big influence on them. And I think, in general, from the perspective of the whole structure of your ambitions, I think that today and tomorrow are actually looking pretty good for you, Sagittarius. So whatever those ambitions are, wherever they, whether it's a social group, whether it's business, whether it's career, whether it's politics, whatever, I think that you do have an opportunity to pursue your ambitions. And I think you are just helped by your ability to understand other people. And I think in some ways you will understand them better than themselves. I think you'll understand their motivations better than themselves. Of course, that means that you need to be a little bit distant. If you're right up close to where the action is, you're not going to be able to fully understand what's going on because you're going to be overwhelmed by it. But if you take a step back from the action, Sagittarius, that is a position to be in. That is a position where you will have maximum control. Capricorn. So Capricorn, we have the moon moving into Cancer, and when the moon moves into Cancer, it makes a sextile to the sun in Virgo. So because of this moon sextile sun, and moon in Virgo sextile the sun, I think that it looks but like being a reasonably satisfying day. I think that you will be satisfied with other people. I think other people are going to respond in the right way to you. I think that you can benefit from other people's presence. You can also benefit from other people's ideas, and that's always good. You might be thinking about something and you might want to put it into action, and you're just wondering quite how to do it, and a little bit of help and a little bit of advice could actually be very useful. And just remember also that Mercury is going stationary direct, and so just for everyone with Mercury going stationary direct, things are kind of returning to normal. Things that were unspoken and were confusing and were hidden are now clarifying, and you can see that in yourself in terms of your own clarity, but you can also see it in terms of other people and how they are behaving and how they are acting. And so that's kind of nice. And with Mercury going direct, for you, I think you will have greater clarity about things that are simple and also about things that are complicated. So if something has been complicated and you haven't really understood it, you knew it was important and you were really trying to understand it, with Mercury going stationary direct, it will start to become obvious, in a way that you'd really been striving for, but it hadn't come together. But now it's there, it's in front of you. And I think if you're honest with yourself, then you'll not just be able to understand the complications, but you can actually find some kind of resolution. Now, one aspect that I probably need to mention is the fact that Venus is making an opposition to Neptune. That opposition to Neptune is exact tomorrow. And this Venus opposition Neptune, just give a slightly different picture. Mercury, it's true, Mercury going stationary direct is sort of simplifying things and is making you understand certain complicated issues. But Venus opposition Neptune could, in certain situations, create some kind of emotional uncertainty. I'm not your emotional uncertainty, but it's like other people's emotional uncertainty. And I think that perhaps when you're dealing with not just your ambitions, but other people's ambitions and how people try to articulate their ambitions, there just may be a moment of uncertainty. Well, it's not a moment of uncertainty, actually, perhaps a day or two of uncertainty, actually, to be honest, where people are finding it difficult to be clear because they're being over-emotional. And I think that is the problem. If you can take away the emotion, not your emotion, if you can separate other people from their emotion, then things are fine. And of course, it's always important to separate yourself from your emotion if that's appropriate. But that Venus opposition Neptune could be a little bit treacherous, and so it's just important that everyone is clear about that. And you have to ask yourself, what is it? What is it that is making things complicated? What is this thing that is just potentially spoiling the day? Everything should be clear, but it's not clear. There's just one area of uncertainty and confusion, and so perhaps you just need to work with it. And you're a Capricorn, you're very down to earth, and with this moon in Cancer sextile the Sun in Virgo, I think that is grounding. And so perhaps what it's all about is you having the ability to clear the fog. The Venus opposition Neptune represents the fog, everything that's preventing us seeing what's in front of us. We clear the fog, then we're in a position where we can take clear action, and and we can be decisive, and we can take advantage of the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct. But fundamentally, we don't want to take away from the fact that the moon is in Cancer, sextile the sun. Moon is in your opposite sign in Cancer, and so you do have the opportunity to ground other people and to have good contacts with other people. And if there is confusion and subterfuge, I think that's something you can address, and yeah, you can indeed clear the fog. Aquarius, you probably feel that you have things to do, probably things that maybe only you can do. Yeah, of course, that is a very Aquarian approach, isn't it? You can't really rely on other people to sort things out because they don't have the same perspective as you. They really don't. And so that might just be how you feel, that it's a lonely path that you're cutting for yourself. But I wouldn't have said that is necessarily the case. The moon it's true that the moon is in Cancer, or moon is moving from Gemini to Cancer. It's I suppose is a time when you may feel that there are greater obligations upon you. It's not just about having fun or having parties. Every party has to be cleared up. When there's fun, you have to deal with the opposite reaction. Fun is inevitably followed by seriousness and being down to earth, and that might just be how it feels. And yeah, you might feel that you're the only one that can really sort it out, and you don't really need anyone's help. But the moon in Cancer does make a sextile to the sun, and that sextile to the sun does have a social dimension. The sun can represent another person. After all, the sun rules Leo, and Leo is your opposite sign. So with the moon sextile the sun, there's an opportunity here to really benefit from another person in a constructive way. And help is certainly available, and help is appropriate. That's the key point. It is appropriate. It is not appropriate, I don't think, for you to do or feel that you should be doing everything on your own. There is assistance, maybe not a lot of assistance, but someone is out there who is prepared to make the effort on your behalf. And it's someone, I think, who has a good sense of detail, who has perhaps a sense of service. It may not even be a situation where, there has to be some exchange where you do someone a favor, they do you a favor. It's not necessarily about that. It's just someone is out there, and they are prepared to be of service. And talking about other people, today Mercury goes stationary direct, and it could be tomorrow, depends on your time zone, but Mercury is in Leo, your opposite sign. And with Mercury going stationary direct, this sort of continues on the social theme. It may be we're talking about someone who starts to become clear after a period of being completely unclear, being completely confusing, and you haven't understood them. And it may be about someone starting to make up their mind, or being clearer about their intentions. And this does make it easier, because you don't want to play guessing games with other people, trying to guess what their motives are, what their intentions are. With Mercury going stationary direct, it's people understanding perhaps the truth, or perhaps understanding what they want to do. And I know, Aquarius, you'd like to think that you you were completely self-sufficient. Of course, you're not completely self-sufficient. No one's self-sufficient entirely, and another person's confusion can have an impact on you. And it may not be another person; it may be an organization. Perhaps you've been waiting for some decision for the last few weeks, and the decision hasn't been forthcoming from some outside body. I suppose it might be a person trying to make a decision. But with Mercury stationary direct, it may be that the decision is about to be made, or that you'll soon get news about this decision. Again, it might be an organization, might be a person. It might just be the universe itself. The world out there is trying to make a decision, and you're waiting for that decision. And it's been a long wait. And just over the next few days, you'll feel that the cosmos has decided. And once you know that the cosmos has decided, you'll then be able to make your own decisions, and you'll be able to benefit from an overall sense of clarity. Pisces. The moon is moving into Cancer, and I think from a Pisces perspective, that's good. Cancer is a water sign. Recently there haven't been too much in water signs. We've had Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, but really at the moment Saturn and Neptune are always in Pisces. And so with the moon moving into Cancer, finally there is some water. You kind of might feel that you're reaching an oasis. You need a bit of water there. You need planets in water signs, and Saturn and Neptune perhaps isn't quite good enough, or at least that's how it feels. And so with moon moving into Cancer, it may happen today, maybe it happen tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. With moon moving into Cancer, things feel as if they're moving again, at least on an emotional level, and it feels that you can be yourself more, and you'll feel, I think, sort of more nurtured by your environment, and because you feel you're able to be yourself, and because you feel you're being nurtured, that means you can start to do things which you feel comfortable with doing, and things that really are about who you are. And who you are is someone who is special. You're not just one little fish in a shoal. You are a unique individual, and you've got something important to offer. And in the recent past, you may have felt you didn't have much to offer, but now you really do feel it. And if you've got some, special ability, whatever it is, now is a time to bring that ability out into the open, perhaps helped by someone else, because the moon is making a sextile to the sun. And remember, the sun is in Virgo, your opposite sign. So moon sextile sun means, I think, that you're going to be, by and large, quite supported by other people. Okay, not everyone, but the important people in your life can be supportive, and matters are further helped by the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct. So Mercury is ruler of Virgo, which is your opposite sign. So Mercury in the Pisces chart does have a special connection with relationships. So you could say that with Mercury going stationary direct, that someone is being more forthcoming. Someone is perhaps ready to make a decision. Someone is just being more responsive. And perhaps they're noticing you. Perhaps you'd felt ignored a little bit for the last few weeks, but someone is now noticing you. And so I think that is something that is really very much to be welcomed. But you don't have to just take everything as it comes. You don't have to be just going with the flow, even if that flow seems very natural. It's more than that. I think that you should also accept that you have a certain sense of authority at the moment. You had this yesterday when I talked about what was going on in your life yesterday, but it's more of the same. I think that you're able to communicate with conviction and with actually great seriousness if you want to. You can be light and free thinking, and I think your sense of humor is on great form at the moment. But if something needs to be said, and perhaps you even need to be critical, and you notice that someone's maybe doing something wrong, if something needs to be said, you are in a great position to say it. And you have a good sense, I think, at the moment of the law of the land. You also have a good sense of how power and hierarchies work. And because you understand how power and hierarchies work, you are in a good position to explain that to other people. You're also in a good position to explain it to yourself. So I think at the moment you have a good sense of where you stand in the hierarchy, what your limits are, who's above you, who's below you, exactly where you are. And because you understand where you are in the hierarchy, you can perhaps take steps to improve your position in the hierarchy, even maybe go up the hierarchy if that's what you're interested in. I suppose we're not supposed to be worried about ego and power and whatever, but unfortunately egos and power and status, they're just part of this world in many cases. So if you feel that you need to move up the ladder, I think you will understand what you need to do in order to do it. That's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at today, Wednesday, from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 13, with others. Now, in the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, it's, I think this hexagram is called Fellowship with Men. With others is kind of saying exactly the same thing. This is how Greg Winkup describes this hexagram, with others. I suppose, fellowship with men sort of, it perhaps has connotations of gender, and I don't think we need to think about it in terms of gender, although I suppose, you have to think about your particular situation. I mean, sometimes the I Ching can be very literal, and it just grabs you how literal the I Ching would be. So maybe it is about fellowship with men in a gendered sense, but I think I'd prefer to use Winkup's translation, which is with others. And so with others is a day where it seems to be a day when there is a focus on other people and who we are with, who our contacts are. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that we have to actually physically be with them. Nowadays people can contact each other in all sorts of ways, and it's not, physical contact is just one way in which we can be with others. You've got phones, emails, social media, Zoom, whatever. So that's a broad start, the concept we begin with. Now, there is one moving line, and the moving line is at the bottom. The bottom line moves. And so with the bottom line moving, there are a number of ways of looking at it. It could be about first contacts. That's how it feels. We're making first contacts with people, but it hasn't really solidified yet. It's still very much up in the air. We're beginning to perhaps getting to know people. And I suppose that ties in maybe with Mercury going stationary direct. So Mercury is about communication, And so with Mercury going, have been retrograde for a few weeks, maybe we've lost contact with people, or contacts haven't been as clear as they should be, and there've been confused messages. But now things may be changing with others, that bottom line moving. We're having those first contacts, and we have not committed yet. The I Ching talks about with others at the gate. So we haven't gone all the way. We haven't gone into the house. We haven't gone into the fortress. We've still got open ground. The gate, the thing about the gate is that there are two choices, aren't there? There's a choice of going inside the building, but you've still got open ground on the other side. So you haven't gone through the gate yet. And so it is at a very early stage. And, there is the opportunity here to turn back. No commitments have been made. And I think that is good. Now, there is another way of looking at this line, which says, well, this is a time when there could be factions. It's warning about that as well. I think it's the Wilhelm translation. It talks about being with others in a factional sense, being within our group, and people looking after themselves. That is not healthy, and the I Ching is quite clear that that is not healthy. We should be avoiding being with others for factional reasons, trying to pursue our own interests, using our influence. That is not how it should be. So it's all at an early stage. So where should it be going? Well, it's made clear by the following hexagram. And the following hexagram is hexagram 33, which is retreat. So there may be the beginnings of social interaction, interacting with new people, but then at a certain stage, we should perhaps get out. If we're at the gate, do we go in or do we go back into open ground? We should probably go back into open ground. It's perhaps not a time for accepting someone's hospitality. It's not a time for going through the gate. And I think this may also link up with the fact that we got Venus opposition Neptune. With Venus opposition Neptune, Venus is the planet of relationships. It is with other people. Opposition Neptune, we're not really sure what people's intentions are. And yeah, we want to be with people, but it may not be the right time. And there's another reason why we perhaps might want to retreat, and that's because we're just simply not ready. We're perhaps in a stronger position than we used to be, but we're not quite strong enough. And so if before engaging with heavy social interaction, meeting people in a serious way, perhaps we're talking about relationships as well, embarking on new relationships, we're not quite strong enough. And we perhaps need to build up our strength. And that links with retreat. So retreat is not about cowardice, by the way. Retreat is a sensible thing to do. So I think overall it's about considering getting close to people, considering having agreements with people. I'm talking about really new people, really. You're considering upping the pace of your social life, but then realizing, it's not really the thing to do and we need to pull back. So we get to the gate, but I don't think we want to go further than the gate. And of course, we do have Mercury stationary direct today. And that's what I want to finish with. So it happens today. Mercury goes stationary direct. And I often wonder with Mercury retrograde, astrologers make such a big thing of it. And I sort of kind of have the theory that the people who are most affected by Mercury going stationary, going retrograde and direct are astrologers themselves, or people who believe in astrology. Maybe the rest of the world, it doesn't affect them. Perhaps, I'm not saying that's right, but it is possible. And it's just something that perhaps we as astrologers are particularly influenced by. So it may be that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We sort of know that Mercury is going retrograde or direct, and so that has an impact on our actions and on our cognitions. So with Mercury going direct, if we follow the system, the idea with Mercury going direct is we've had 3 weeks of Mercury going retrograde. Then when it goes retrograde, it may be difficult to get things done, and there may be a certain sense of having to go over things again, and plans may get disrupted. And then the idea is that when Mercury goes direct, everything returns to normal, but we can continue with the path. Now, there is another view, which some astrologers talk about, is the fact that you don't fully get over Mercury going direct until Mercury has returned to where it was when it went retrograde. So let me just explain what that means. So if you look at the ephemeris, you can see that Mercury went retrograde at the beginning of August at 4 degrees 6 Virgo. So we may not be over Mercury retrograde, even though Mercury is going direct now, until Mercury returns to 406 Virgo. So it returns to 406 Virgo at about, when does it happen? It seems to be about the 11th, 12th of September. So we may be happy that Mercury is now stationary direct, or is about to be stationary direct, but it may not actually be until the 11th or the 12th of September that things actually and completely return to normal. So what about this particular Mercury retrograde? Mercury stationary direct. What's it about? How might it affect us? Okay, I've gone through the 12 signs and I've tried to look at how each of the 12 signs might be affected by Mercury going stationary direct, but how might it affect us in a general sense, the world in general? So let's look at the chart for Mercury going direct. Here it is, August the 28th, 2024, and I've gone for 10:14 p.m. That's the moment it goes direct, London time. And so here's the chart, because this is set for London. And at first I don't really want to look at it from a located perspective. I just want to look at the chart in general. So what about Mercury? Where is Mercury? So Mercury is at 2125 Leo. Now, Mercury 2025 Leo, on the surface, doesn't seem to be doing a great deal, but we might say, well, Mercury is sextile Jupiter, so that's probably quite fortunate, Mercury sextile Jupiter here. I think many of us, when Mercury is stationary direct, we're going to feel a certain lift, a certain sort of sense of optimism that, finally things are happening. We've had 3 weeks where we haven't really known what's going on, but I think we move into this stationary direct period with I think a certain confidence that perhaps things are moving forward. Now, it's true at the time of Mercury, when Mercury is direct, at the moment Mercury is going direct, we do have a Venus opposition Neptune. So I think that Venus opposition Neptune is going to colour the Mercury direct period, certainly over the next few days, maybe longer. And Venus opposition Neptune can be a false sense of optimism. Maybe we are deluding ourselves. Maybe we're focusing on the wrong things. There's a sense of sort of fantasy here with Mercury going direct, a belief that things really are getting better, but the question is, are they getting better? And that might be an issue for some of us. So with Mercury going direct, we do have to have our eyes open. That is important. Really, for the next few weeks, maybe till September the 11th, 12th, we have to have our eyes open. Just because things seem to be getting back to normal doesn't mean they actually are getting back to normal. So there is a bit of a warning there with that Mercury opposition Neptune. Now, I think it's also important to look at the midpoints of Mercury that Mercury is on. So I want to, if we look at the midpoints of Mercury, so what we do, this, I'm really sorry if this is a bit sort of complex, but I just do think midpoints are important. So Mercury goes, here's Mercury. You can see that Mercury is at 2125 Leo, which is on 45-degree dial, is the same as 625 cardinal. So what midpoints is Mercury on? Well, for a start, forget the midheaven because I'm trying to be generic here. Mercury is very close to a 45 series aspect with Cupido. And Cupido is the planet of love. It's a planet... Remember, Cupido is a hypothetical planet, I should say. Alfred Witter, he worked out the position of Cupido by observing Russian artillery barrages on the Eastern Front in the First World War. See, nothing changes, does it? And so he was trying to link artillery barrages, Russian artillery barrages, with the planets. He couldn't find any planets that fitted the Russian artillery barrages, because I think he was a soldier in the German army at the time. And so he thought, well, there had to be a planet which would explain it. And so he came up with this, with Cupido. And so, but he then associated Cupido not with artillery barrages, but with union and love and marriage. So Mercury is very close to making a hard aspect with Cupido. And so it is going to perhaps be a time with Mercury going direct that many of us are going to actually want to be with people. People are going to be important. Perhaps many of us are going to feel that, relationships have been a bit up in the air recently, but now we want to change things, and we're very aware of ourselves as social beings. And if you look at the midpoints that Mercury is on, it's not just on Cupido. It's Mercury is very close to the Moon, make it by hard aspect. So Mercury is on the Moon Cupido midpoint, and look at the node. Look at the lineup. Mercury is connected with the Moon, and it's connected with the node. So you've got Mercury on the Moon Cupido node, and then it's on the Neptune Hades midpoint. I'll be talking about that in a moment, and then the Venus Hades midpoint. So that's what's happening with Mercury and Moon Cupido and Cupido node. So let's go back to the chart so we can actually start to see what that looks like, and let's put the hypothetical planets on it. So let me just quickly shift that planet with this, so we can see the hypothetical planets. Okay, there is Cupido. Where's Cupido gone? So Cupido, remember, Cupido is the planet of love and unions, and it's there at 6 degrees Capricorn. So 6 degrees Capricorn is exactly sesquiquadrate Mercury, and there is a node. The nodal axis is semi-square sesquiquadrate Mercury. So I think that this Mercury going stationary direct is really important in terms of people and getting on with people and creating new contacts, new unions. In many cases, it may be about marriage. I mean, some people with this Mercury going stationary direct, depending on their circumstances, maybe feel this is the time to get married. This is the time to make a romantic union stronger. May not just be about marriage. It may be about alliances. Perhaps on the sort of the Cupido is not just about romantic love. It can be about nations wanting to come together to form new alliances. So we're very much focused on who our friends are, and relationships really do matter, I think, with Mercury going stationary direct. And let me just look at this from a perspective of the 90-degree dial, which I do like to do, just so we can actually see what this looks like. Remember, this is a 90-degree dial where conjunctions and oppositions and squares are shown as conjunctions, and semisquares and sesquiquadrates are shown as oppositions. So if we move this dial to where Mercury is, there's Mercury, you can see, and then Mercury is making semisquares as sesquiquadrates to the nodes, to the moon, and to Cupido, really emphasizing the point that Mercury going stationary direct is about people, unions, contacts, alliances, perhaps even marriages. And then we can see some of the midpoints it's on, and in particular it's on the Hades Venus and Hades Neptune midpoint. I think there is a warning here. I've talked about Venus and the Venus-Neptune opposition, but Mercury links with that Venus-Neptune opposition, and it's particularly linked with Hades. So while a lot of us really do want to get close to one another, we do have to be careful. Neptune Hades may indicate that we don't always know who we're dealing with. So I think it's absolutely fine to get close to people. I think that's the right thing to do. But it's always a good idea to get close to people who you understand and you know their dark side. I think in terms of social relations, it's always important, if you want to have a good relationship with someone, is to know their dark side, to know how horrible they are. Because remember, everyone is horrible, everyone. So if you know where someone is horrible, if you know where someone is unpleasant, how someone is unpleasant, you're in a position to evaluate them. You can start to trust someone if you know where their horribleness lies. Of course, if they're psychopathically horrible, that's a different matter, but we always need to understand people's dark sides. So don't get involved with unions and marriages or partnerships unless you really know what you're dealing with. And I think that is going to be important. So it's a very much, in terms of relationships, it's a two-edged sword. I think relationships, for many of us, really can prosper with this Mercury going stationary direct. But I think we do have to be a little bit careful there because of the influence of that Venus opposition Neptune. It's so easy to delude ourselves. Now, as far as the world at large and how the world might be impacted, I thought it might be interesting just to do some astrocartography on this. So here's Mercury direct doing some astrocartography on this. Oh, one thing I should say from a generational perspective, if you are born approximately between 1960 and 1961, you're going to have your Uranus at around 21, 19 to 23 Leo. So if you're one of those people, this Mercury direct, this Mercury going stationary direct may affect you and your generation. It may be that you will start to see things. Your Uranus is going to be stimulated by Mercury hitting your Uranus. It is generational. I'm not saying it's going to happen anything particularly personal, but your generation is going to perhaps be inspired and shocked, and you start to see the world for what it really is, and things are starting to become clear. Similarly, if you're born in the early 50s, so if you're born, I don't know, that would mean you'd be in your early 70s. So, and you've got your Pluto around 19 to 21, 19 to 23 Leo. If you're born in the early 50s, you're going to have Mercury going stationary direct on your Pluto. And so I suppose that's going to be a little bit different from having Mercury direct on your Uranus, but it's going to be very generational, and it's going to perhaps tell you something about your generation and how your generation is relating to things going on in the world. And it may be quite a dramatic realization. It depends where you are, what country you are. It's more, I think, about how you relate to events going on in your society. But it's also about Pluto and Leo, about your ability to transform yourself and your environment, and that Mercury going stationary direct may give you insights about how actually you can do it. Okay, sorry. Let's now move back to the world, and let me just do an astrocartography for this, for Mercury going stationary direct. So there. So what I'm looking for is places where Mercury is angular, and so Mercury is angular. Mercury will be on the ascendant through sort of parts of eastern Australia and parts of China. That's true. I don't know whether you can. You probably can't quite see the line because it's kind of a bit obscured. So the Australia is not. I'm getting in the way here, but you'll have to trust me. Going through eastern, if you're in eastern Australia, I don't know. There's a town called Derby. It goes through. There may be a sort of Mercury feel to it, and that goes through China. So that might be in that part of the world that Mercury on the ascendant does have an impact. But I'm perhaps more concerned about. I think it actually goes through Honolulu. Mercury is on the midheaven I think it's in Hawaii, but I suppose not many people live in Hawaii. What about Europe? I know a lot of people live in Hawaii, but I don't know how many people are listening to this who are in Hawaii. But maybe there'll be events in Hawaii which relate to Mercury going direct. So that's so perhaps we should look at what's happening in Hawaii over the next couple of weeks. I suppose we have to watch out for fires. Mercury's in Leo, but I assume Hawaii's learnt its lesson. And I want to now sort of home in on Europe. So looking at Europe, okay. Here are all the places where Mercury is on the midheaven. So you can see Mercury is on the midheaven in Minsk, the capital. When Saturn goes direct, Mercury is on the midheaven in Minsk. And Minsk is, of course, the capital of Belarus, which is an ally of Russia. There's a lot of action going on the Ukraine-Minsk border. And there is actually a theoretical place in northwest Ukraine where Mars is Mercury is on the midheaven, and Mars is conjunct Mars is conjunct the ascendant, and I have a feeling there might be probably a big airbase around there, so that might be a sort of a point of attack. But Western Ukraine, the focus is on Western Ukraine. Of course, the war is not happening in Western Ukraine. Okay, the air war is happening. Missiles are raining down on all parts of Ukraine, including the West. But there is a theoretical place in northwestern Ukraine which could get a lot of attention, maybe with Mercury going stationary direct. You can follow the Mercury. You can see all the places where Mercury is on the midheaven, and you can go down through Bucharest, Bulgaria, maybe Istanbul. I don't know what's happening in Turkey. So those are a few ideas. You might then be asking, is there any point in doing this chart for the world? Can you really do it? I just wanted to quickly just do a couple of examples. So here, for example, is Mercury going direct in 1939 on August the 20th. So I've set this for for London. So I've taken a precise moment just before the First World War started, just before Germany invaded Poland, and I set that for London. So if I set this for Warsaw, this is Warsaw set for August 20th, 1939, and you can see that Mercury direct was quite close to the descendant, and Mercury at the time was right opposition Black Moon Lilith. So that provides some evidence that Warsaw might be a problem place in the weeks following Mercury going direct on August 20th, 1939. And I think the Black Moon Lilith is really telling us that something is wrong here, true Black Moon Lilith. So perhaps when Mercury goes stationary direct, you need to look at what it's aspecting. And yeah, with that Mercury opposition Black Moon Lilith right across the ascendant-descendant line set for Warsaw, that does seem to indicate that something bad may be about to happen, especially when you look at the moon. The moon was at 12 Scorpio, really quite an unpleasant place for the moon, being in the Via Combusta, being in its fall, and yeah, moon exactly square Mercury, moon exactly square Black Moon Lilith, and moon being square the ascendant in Warsaw. So I think there is certainly value in looking at the charts for the moment Mercury goes stationary direct. Also stationary retrograde, but in this video I'm looking at stationary direct. Let's have a look at another example. Here is Mercury going stationary direct on April 27th, 1945, set for Berlin. And Mercury is... it's not the fact that Mercury itself is angular, but at the moment Mercury went direct, there was pretty much a full moon. And this full moon was right across the ascendant. And look, the moon was in Scorpio, 3 degrees Scorpio, point of maximum fall. And yes, it's opposition the sun. And South Node is on the midheaven. So I would have said it is worth setting up charts for the moment Mercury goes direct. Now, a couple of people who might be impacted by Mercury going direct. There is... British Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Now, he has got himself into trouble because in 2018 he said some really bad things about Donald Trump. He said he was a neo-Nazi. Said he was a sociopath. You know, that's a bad thing for a potential foreign secretary to say, and I think that's the kind of thing Donald remembers, isn't it? I mean, people are saying, oh, well, it's not so bad that David Lammy has been in contact with J.D. Vance. David Lammy, actually, I think he has a law degree from Yale, like J.D. Vance, so they have something in common. So they have been in contact. But still, it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing for a potential foreign secretary to say. Anyway, David Lammy is the foreign secretary, and here is his horoscope. And he was born July the 19th, 1972. I'm not going to spend very long on it, just enough to point out that David Lammy has his Mercury at 21 Leo. So Mercury going stationary direct on David Lammy's Mercury, I think that could be important. I'm not saying it's bad, by the way. I think there could be a change in his approach, in his... I mean, I'm not saying he's going to lose his job or anything, but if I were advising him, I would have said he perhaps needs to relaunch himself. He gets criticized. I mean, he is clever. I mean, he's no fool, is David Lammy, but he just puts his foot in it, and he comes over as perhaps superficially ignorant about British history in terms of quizzes and so forth, but you know, he is clever, and perhaps with Mercury going stationary direct on his Mercury, he can perhaps use this to, or maybe he needs to reach out to Donald. Maybe he's got something to say to Trump. Maybe that's something he's going to say. But of course, he might want to talk to Kamala because his Mercury is on 21 Leo, and Kamala Harris's Kamala Harris's Mars is on 21 Leo. Now that's interesting. Now it may be actually that David Lammy doesn't actually there's something that grates between him and Kamala Harris, perhaps. But David Lammy is only Foreign Secretary of Britain. Britain is a pretty minor power in the grand scheme of things, and Kamala Harris doesn't have to worry too much about David Lammy. But she does have Mercury going stationary direct on her Mars. I don't think this is necessarily going to be fortunate. I think she's under a lot of pressure with the debates, and what's she going to do about the debate? I think she's concerned, and I think that she has a reputation for annoying people. She finds she's someone who's difficult to work for, and with Mercury on her Mars, we might see outbursts over the next couple of weeks. Her tension and perhaps her nervousness and what we do about the debate. I think she must be a very difficult person to be with, and I think she will be a very difficult person to be with Mercury going stationary direct on her Mars, because that really does emphasize her Mars. And finally, there is Elon. We must never forget Elon. So here's Elon Musk's horoscope. So Elon Musk has his where's Elon Musk? Elon Musk has his Mars at 20 degrees Aquarius. So with Mercury opposition his Mars, I think that it's possible that he could be quite aggravated here. Mercury opposition his Mars. So remember, that means that Elon Musk has his Mars opposition Kamala Harris. So clearly they can't stand each other. I mean, I don't know if they've ever met. But Mercury hitting that point, you could see Elon Musk and Kamala Harris trading insults. Probably it'll be one way. Elon Musk having a lot to say about Kamala Harris. And also him feeling under pressure with Mercury going stationary direct. I think that Elon Musk has to be careful. He doesn't want to go over the top with that Mars. So there are three people who may be impacted by Mercury going stationary direct. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Mercury stationary direct. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks very much for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.